We're going to work on them a little bit. I have a question for the crew, for all y'all, as we're laying out our upcoming schedule. Wednesday night before Thanksgiving, I will be out. I'll be in Missouri. I'm not sure who all would be here, or do you want to have Bible study on the Wednesday night before Thanksgiving, or do you want to cancel the service on Wednesday night before Thanksgiving? I need to settle that tonight. So let's kind of say who would be here for it and who would not be here for it. Anybody that's going to be here? Robin, Susie, and maybe Rusty and Odette. Okay. Where two or three are gathered, you don't even need a teacher. Just talk. I'm kind of feeling like, why don't we just go ahead and call that one? We'll cancel the Wednesday night before Thanksgiving, and that way we need to go ahead and I'll have Reba put that on the Facebook and everything. I think oftentimes we do that anyway. I think that's kind of been our normal. Yeah. Okay. Any upcoming events? Hudson House tomorrow? On the 20th. Okay. Anything else? The 22nd is the college kids, and anybody that wants to tag hiking in Polladura Canyon. Good. You can be the guide. You can guide us. And then we will begin starting into our Christmas season, and we'll discuss what we're going to do with outlay the calendar for Christmas season and all of those things. I said we're going to look at our Christmas calendar and lay out what we're going to do during the Christmas season. So, Christmas is Thursday. So we will probably, we're having let me look. I'm 90% sure, I always leave room for error, that on the 21st, Sunday the 21st, we will have our candlelight service that evening. Christmas candlelight service and communion service. And then we will probably cancel the Wednesday night Bible study on Christmas Eve because the majority of our people are gone somewhere. We'll discuss that for sure. But to go ahead and mark your calendar for the 21st for the Sunday evening candlelight service. And that's a great opportunity to invite friends and family that don't go. It's kind of a good outreach service for that. So is there anything else upcoming that we need to lay out? Okay. We'll let you know. The Thanks Christmas one? That will be the 3rd. We can do that. We can have Thanks Christmas on the 3rd, split the meal on the 3rd of December and the Wednesday night dinner, and make that a turkey tamale dinner. Tamale. Okay. So let's go ahead and Odette, if you want to help me get that to Yvette, because I would tell Kyle, but he'll forget to tell her that we're planning that. And then also Sunday the 7th of December, immediately following the service that morning, we will have our year-end business meeting and budget meeting. right after service. So that's on December 7th. Okay. It's a busy time of year, so I like to kind of lay it out, plan it out, and have everything. Anything else? Okay, let's pray. Lord, thank you for an awesome day, beautiful weather, just for the chill in the air and the warm afternoons. It's just it's a good time to be in the Panhandle, Lord. Thank you for that. Thank you for our church, for the opportunity to come together, study, and to fellowship. Lord, I just pray the Holy Spirit move among us tonight, giving us clarity and wisdom and understanding. Reveal yourself in a special way. In Jesus' name, amen. We are on lesson 65, which would be in Joshua chapter 3. In our last Bible study, we looked at Rahab and the situation with Jericho and how all of that when they went in to spy out. Tonight, Israel gets ready to cross the Jordan River. Now, it's interesting and important for us to remind ourselves historically what has taken place from the time they left Egypt until we find them at this juncture in the journey as they're about to finally go in across the Jordan River and begin the conquest of the land of Canaan. What all has taken place from their last few days in Egypt? Start. How did they get out of Egypt? Out of Egypt? What happened? Plagues. Come on now. It hadn't been that long. How many plagues? 10. What was the last one? The death of the firstborn and Passover of the death angel. It's important that we understand that term in the Passover, what that would mean. It would become a festival that they would celebrate even into today. Judaism practices the celebration of Passover. And then they would come out of Egypt. What's the next big event that they encounter? The Red Sea and the armies of Pharaoh bearing down to come and recapture them and take them back to Egypt, and God miraculously opened the Red Sea. And they passed through on dry ground. And then as they cleared, God removed the barriers, the water returned and drowned the armies of Pharaoh. Okay, next. They make their way around. Lots of different things happen. They encounter skirmishes and hostilities. And then they come to the Jordan River. Moses sends out 12 spies. The spies come back and say, no way, there are giants over there. Okay. And so 40 years, God would make them wander through the wilderness, homeless, if you would, while the promised land of their homeland that he had promised Abraham he would give them was over there, but they could not enter into it because of their rebellion, their refusal. So for 40 years, they wandered around, and there was an entire generation. Everyone above the age of 20 would pass away, except for who? Caleb and Joshua and Moses, because Moses would lead them back, and then he wouldn't get to go. We would hand over leadership. So there's been a lot that's happened, and they find themselves back in the same place at the River Jordan. In this time now, Moses has passed away. Joshua has assumed leadership. And I wanted to make a point that we need to be mindful of. I'm not going to spend much time on it because I want to dive into some of the details of this tonight. Whenever God leads us somewhere, opens a door, opens a direction, shows us whether that is, I'm just throwing stuff out, whether it's serving in church in a particular role or mission, or whenever God puts a calling, and I think we all kind of understand the concept of calling. If we rebel, we'll walk a big circle only to come back to the same place where we started. And I think of Jonah. He said no, and he went on a big circle in the belly of a fish. And when he got spit out on the ground, where did God say, okay, Jonah, now what? Go to Nineveh, Jonah. And so the children of Israel have spent 40 years of their own doing through not trusting God, through being afraid to step out in faith and take hold of the promise. For 40 years, a generation passed, only to find themselves right back in the same place again. Why? Because God said, you're going to inhabit this land. This is a land I promised to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob. You're going to inhabit this land. So, thoughts on that in my life. Is it easier to step out in faith into the unknown the first time, or go through the wilderness cycles waiting only to come back to the same place again? It would be easier to listen. It would be smarter to listen the first time. I don't know if it's always easier. Mm-hmm. It does. The wilderness produces valuable things in us. But also, it's like God spent 40 years showing them that he was trustworthy. Providing food, providing water, providing a column of light and a cloud that shaded them and clothes that didn't wear out. I mean, God spent 40 years showing them, I am trustworthy. However, he had also just spent a pretty important period of time in Egypt showing them that he's trustworthy, that he's going to bring them out. So, but you're right, the time in the wilderness for them would develop. And this time when they get back to the Jordan River, the mindset of this generation is completely different than the previous generation. We talked about that some last week, that this generation's like, we watched what happened to all of our loved ones, to all of our family, we watched what happened when they said, no, let's go. We're ready to go. And so that's kind of the scene that leads up to where we are. Then, and starting in chapter 3, Joshua rose up early in the morning, and they set out from Shittim, and they came to the Jordan, and he and all the people of Israel, and lodged there before they passed over. At the end of 3 days, the officers went through the camp and commanded the people, as soon as you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God being carried by the Levitical priests, then you shall set out from your place and follow it. Yet there shall be a distance between you and it, about 2,000 cubits in length. Do not come near it, in order that you may know the way you shall go, for you have not passed this way before. And Joshua said to the people, consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. And Joshua said to the priests, take up the ark of the covenant and pass on before the people. So they took up the ark of the covenant and went before the people. The Lord said to Joshua, today I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, that they may know that as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. And as for you, command the priest to bear the ark of the covenant. When you come to the brink of the waters of the Jordan, you shall stand still in the Jordan. And Joshua said to the people of Israel, come here and listen to the words of the Lord your God. And Joshua said, here is how you shall know that the living God is among you, and that he will without fail drive out from before you the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Perizzites, the Girgashites, and the Amorites, the Jebusites. Behold, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth is passing over before you into the Jordan. Now therefore, take 12 men from the tribes of Israel, from each tribe a man. And when the soles of the feet of the priests bearing the ark of the Lord and the Lord of all the earth shall rest on the waters of the Jordan shall be cut off from flowing, and the waters coming down from above shall stand in one heap. So when the people set out from their tents to pass over the Jordan with the priests bearing the ark of the covenant before the people, and as soon as those bearing the ark had come as far as the Jordan, and the feet of the priests bearing the ark were dipped in the brink of the water, now the Jordan overflows all its banks throughout the time of harvest. The waters coming down from above stood and rose up in a heap very far away at Adam, the city that is beside Zarethan. And those flowing down toward the sea of Arabah, the salt sea, were completely cut off, and the people passed over opposite Jericho. Now the priest bearing the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firmly on dry ground in the midst of the Jordan. And all Israel was passing over on dry ground until all the nation finished passing over the Jordan. First section. I know that the parting of the Red Sea and the passing across the Red Sea and all that happened, we've discussed that. That's a fantastic historical moment, but I don't know about you, but when they come to the Jordan, the way that God showed himself to them at the Jordan River is an incredible thing, because there's some stuff that has to take place. One is that the river is overflowing its banks because it's flood season. So it's not like jumping across the creek in Paladura Canyon. It's a huge river. And there were some specific things that they were required to do. So let's kind of back up and look through that. When Joshua got up, what was the first thing that he required the people to do? To consecrate themselves. He gave them, this is what's going to happen in 3 days. The ark of the Lord's coming through and you're going to follow it. But before you do, consecrate yourself. What does that mean? What do you think it means to consecrate yourself? Now, there are Old Testament consecration things, but physically it means that usually would wash their clothes, wash their body, prepare themselves to go. So physically consecrate yourself. What else would it mean to consecrate yourself? Abstinence. I think so. What about to consecrate yourself spiritually? What would need to take place? He doesn't mention sacrifices, so I'm not going to assume that there were, but I'm thinking about, what about repentance? Yeah. Confessing, not only am I washing my clothes and washing my body, getting consecrated, but I'm also renewing my mind and praying, confessing my sins, repenting, getting myself spiritually in a position of that when God moves, I go with him. I'm ready to go. And I think that's cool when we think about it in this context. He says, as soon as you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God being carried, then you shall set out from your place and follow it. So he says, I need you to be consecrated and I need you to be ready, because when you see the ark come through, you need to immediately what? Get in behind and follow it. Now that's reminiscent of what took place in Egypt when they did make the sacrifice and they were gathered in the house and they were told, when you eat of the lamb, you got to eat all of it and eat the bitter herbs, and you need to eat fully dressed with your bags packed, ready to go. So there's an urgency. There was an urgency in Egypt that when the Lord says go, have no hindrance to keep you from going. Be prepared and ready to go. Joshua gives a very similar command here to consecrate yourselves, be ready, and when the Ark of the Covenant passes through, he says, then immediately when you see it, set out from your place and follow it. Get in line and go. So there's a commitment to this time to being prepared and ready for whatever, whenever. Without inferring too much into it, I think about it, and we kind of should be living in a similar situation, right? We do know that because they didn't know exactly when the priests were going to come. They're doing life, getting ready, preparing themselves. They know it's going to be in a few days. And Jesus told us to be prepared because we're not going to know when he's going to come, but we need to be ready. And so what would involve, I'm kind of skipping off of the heart of what we're talking about, but it's not. What's involved in us being prepared for that? When Jesus comes, be ready to go. What do we need to do in order to be ready? What do you think? Have your heart right? Consecrate yourself? I mean, there's parallels. And I think it's by design that God puts these parallels in each of these steps of the redemption plan. And this is a step in the plan to redeem man. Crossing the Jordan and taking the land of Canaan is a step in the redemption plan of God, because this is the land from which the Messiah will come. So it's all in that same plan. And verse 6, and Joshua said to the priests, take up the ark of the covenant and pass on before the people. So they took up the ark of the covenant and went before the people. And the Lord said to Joshua, today I will begin to exalt you. So he said, now today, everybody still remembers Moses, but Joshua, today's the day that leadership changes hands. And it's fascinating that the people did not question the change of leadership when Joshua said go. They were like, okay, we're ready to go. And then the next interesting thing to me is once the ark comes through, he says, get up and follow it, but follow it at 2,000 cubits. So how far would that be, roughly? 3,000 feet. It's out there. Why do you think it's out there? And he says, gap yourself. So let's think about it. What's the Ark of the Covenant? What is it? It's a physical object. What is it? Anybody know? Surely you saw Raiders, right? So within it, it is a box that is carried by the priest. It is covered in gold. It has cherubim on it. It is the place in the Holy of Holies. And on top of the Ark of the Covenant was the mercy seat where the blood was sprinkled from the sacrifice. It is the place where God dwells among the people. So in the center of the Holy of Holies, and even in the tabernacle, in the portable model, in the center of it was the Holy of Holies, and it was surrounded by heavy, heavy curtains. No one could go in there except select priests when they were instructed, because that was where the presence of God came and dwelt with them. So the priests are carrying the Ark of the Covenant so people can see it. What does it represent? God, and I'm following God. They're not following the priests. They're following God. And there is a lesson in that for us too, that whenever we're working our way through this life, that we keep our focus not on all of the pomp and circumstance and church and all the stuff. We keep our eyes focused on the presence of God. And the Ark of the Covenant would represent the presence of God. Also remember, if anybody touched it besides the appointed priest, they would die. So there's that. Keep it out there. Boils and all kinds of stuff. So it's important for us to understand the context of what they're doing. Remember, in the 40 years, God's presence went before them in a pillar of fire at night and a cloud at day. Now he's going before them, leading the way into the promised land. So it's not Joshua that's leading the battle. It's not the armies of Israel that's leading the battle. Who's leading the way into the promised land? God himself. So they're following God. And then he says to the priest, you're going to get to the river and the river's flooding. Do not hesitate. Step in faith, and when your foot hits the water will recede. I don't know about you, but to me that is a massive step of faith. Not only am I stepping into a surging, flooding river, I'm doing so carrying a very heavy object in step with these other guys. We've got to work together. We can't grab it. We've got to do. And so God says, step in. Now, when did the water recede? I'm going to give you all a sign the river's going to dry up. But when did it dry up? After the step of faith into the water. Yep. You got to commit to it. Ankle deep in rushing water with a big heavy object means this is either God does his deal here or I'm gone. And so in my brain, there's the faith of the priests, the Levites, that were willing to just, okay, this is the command. This is what we're going to do. They hit the water and the water begins to recede. And it's interesting how it says it does it, that it just piled up. It just stopped flowing and it just piled up this big mass of water upriver, and they're walking across. Now for the people, they begin to follow the Ark of the Covenant. They follow the priest, and then they go across the river. It's pretty simple, right? They see it, okay, 3,000 feet, I see what's happening, okay, we're good to go. But think about the concept that God set the example to wade out into the water and go. And then we see Jesus do this again in another instance, because he comes walking across the sea in the middle of a storm, and they see him and they begin to shout and scream, it's a ghost, it's all this, and Jesus walks up and says, don't worry, it's me. And Peter says, I want to join you. What did Peter do? He stepped out of the boat and stood on the water. There's something to be said about the willingness to take that step into the unknown. Now, when he took his eyes off Jesus, obviously he began to sink. We know the rest of the story. And I believe that God, this is just Jeff's thinking, God went far enough ahead of him that they wouldn't lose sight of him. And so they could follow faithfully, just like Peter, when he stepped out, they could follow the Ark of the Covenant, following God to complete that task. What are y'all's outtakes on this? I know we've kind of talked around it. What are your thoughts on it? And I'm not always digging for application, but there are some applications for us in it. What are your thoughts? Yeah, I would be interested in seeing the water stacked up there about half a mile up the river, just standing. It would hasten my gait as we go across. Anybody else?
I like that they parted the Red Sea and they parted Jericho, but when Jesus came, he walked on the water.
Yeah.
So it's a completely different outcome from what.
Yeah. When they got to the Red Sea, God parted it so they had dry ground. When they got to the Jordan River, God parted it so they could walk across. When Jesus came out, he said, step into the water. Follow me and stand in it. That's a good point. Verse 17, now the priest bearing the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firmly on dry ground in the midst of the Jordan, and all Israel was passing over on dry ground until all the nation finished passing over the Jordan. So you have this picture that the priests carrying the ark of the covenant started across the river and then stopped in the middle of the river and stood there while the Israelites filed past on dry ground. So there came a point in it. I started in keeping my eyes on God, but now I've got to go. God's here, and I got to keep going. And the priest stood there, and the river's held. And then once everybody got across, the priests finished the course. The waters receded, came back down. The next part of it is one of my favorite stories. In all of Joshua's stories, chapter 4. When all of the nation had finished passing over the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, "Take 12 men from the people, from each tribe a man, command them, saying, take 12 stones from out here of the midst of the Jordan, from the very place where the priest's feet stood firmly, and bring them over with you and lay them down in the place where you lodge tonight." Then Joshua called the 12 men from the people of Israel, whom he had appointed, a man from each tribe. And Joshua said to them, "Pass on before the ark of the Lord your God into the midst of the Jordan, and take up each of you a stone upon his shoulder, according to the number of the tribes of the people of Israel, that this may be a sign among you." I'm going to pause there. What's the next command? Each tribe of Israel, a man picked up a boulder, and it says, put it on your shoulder, out of the midst of the Jordan River where the priests were standing. Go on with this stone and then take it to your tent. Well, this seems strange. Why would we pick up a rock out of the middle of the river? Because it's pretty. River rocks. I'm sorry, I'm addicted. Because Joshua said, pick up a rock. Okay. Now, we know the rest of the story, and he gives them why. And I want to spend some time on this tonight, guys. He says that this may be a sign. When your children ask in time to come, what do those stones mean to you? Then you shall tell them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it passed over the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. So these stones shall be to the people of Israel a memorial forever. The people of Israel did just as Joshua commanded, and they took up 12 stones out of the midst of the Jordan, according to the number of the tribes of the people of Israel, just as the Lord told Joshua. And they carried them over with them to the place where they lodged and laid them down there. What do these stones mean? Well, they represented that God was faithful to his promise, and when we got to the Jordan River, he parted the river so we could cross into the promised land. Now, that's a simple story, but I have pondered for most of my adult life raising children. In this instance, we know it's literally picked up 12 rocks out of the river, and they stacked them up and made a memorial. And for generations, when people would see that pile of rocks, what do these stones mean? Well, let me tell you what it means. And I've pondered for most of my life as an adult, as a dad, pastor, husband, granddad, what memorial stones am I stacking for my children that when they look at it, say, Dad, what does this mean? What memorial stones of God's provision, God's faith, God God's leadership in my life, and I'm going to flip it to you. What stones are you picking up out of the midst of the turbulence and stacking as a memorial to God's faithfulness, so that just for the intention that when my kids ask questions, I have answers? I pondered that a long time, and I'm not here tonight to give you ideas on what stones that you need to stack and what memorials you need to make, but I am going to say that all of us have treaded deep water and God has brought us through it. There have been rivers in our life that we've crossed. What did we take out of it and set up as a memorial to say to our kids? I think it's important that we begin thinking in concepts of generations to come, and what are we leaving for them as reminders of how they got there. I think it's important. What do you guys think? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is a generation that saw what happened when you didn't. Some of them weren't even born yet. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Everything they did, and not just in the crossing of the Jordan, but they're reminders that God brought us here. God brought us through that. God brought us to this place. Now, this is an interesting story, and it may be embarrassing, I don't know, but I'm going to throw it out there. Some of you don't know about it. I have studied and read, I said this is one of my favorite stories. I have read this story over, I've preached multiple sermons over the years on the stones of remembrance from the middle of the Jordan River. What do these stones mean? Saunders heard me preach not thousands, but a lot of sermons. When we came here and were looking for property to build the church on, we didn't have any idea, we didn't have any money, and we didn't know where we were going, but there was a piece of land just up the road from where we were living. This piece of land. It wasn't even really for sale. It was just a piece of land, and there was a cool windmill. And I would drive back and forth and ride my horse up here, and I'd ride my horse. It wasn't really fenced off. I'd ride around up here. And there was some stirring in me and Sandra at the time that this was the piece of property I wanted for this church. I don't know why I wanted to put it on this piece of ground. I just did. I liked where it was. And I was riding my horse out here one day, and fence was all down. Part of it wasn't even there, and I rode into there was water in the water tank, and I rode in and let my horse get a drink, and I'm standing at the water tank, letting my horse get a drink, and I step off, and I'm standing there, and I look down, and there was a round rock about this big, smooth, about that thick. And I picked that rock up and standing there while my horse, and I stuck it in my pocket. And I carried that rock, and I prayed over that piece of ground. And every time I'd reach my hand in my pocket to get my keys, I'd grab that stupid little rock in my pocket off of this piece of ground right out there by the water tank. And I'd remember, God, if this is the property, this is what we want. And I prayed over it. And I carried that rock for 3 years? And the property came for sale, and I went and talked to the lady, and that's another whole story for another time, but we wound up buying this piece of property. And when we got it bought and we moved out here, I carried that rock back out and laid it back down by the windmill from where I'd got it. That's dumb, but that's what this is. That's what this is. I needed a reminder that this was God's place, and every time I'd reach in my pocket, I'd touch that rock. And I'd think to pray about this piece of property, about the church, about what God wanted us to do here. And that's where I began the process of thinking, what memorial stones, if you would, am I putting in place So that the next generation says, hey, what is this about? What does this mean? That I can go, well, let me tell you what this means. Let me tell you about the faithfulness of God. Let me tell you about the provision of God. Let me tell you about the wonderful love of God for you and me. And so I've been kind of, this is a hobby horse of mine, and it happened to land on tonight. But I wanted to ask again, after giving you, I'm not saying that you should pick up rocks and carry them in your pocket. That's not what I'm saying. But there are tangible things that we need to have as reminders that we can look at, that we can touch, we can put our hands on, of God's faithfulness. Now, I debated a long time about keeping that rock. And then I thought, you know what? If I keep that rock, it will become something it doesn't need to be. It served its purpose. And I don't need the rock anymore. So, I'm kind of leaving that open-ended for you all to wrestle with yourself and think about those things. The people of Israel did exactly as Joshua commanded, and they took up 12 stones out of the midst of the Jordan, according to the number of the tribes of the people of Israel, just as the Lord told Joshua, and they carried them over with them to the place where they lodged, and they laid them down there. Verse 19, then the people came up out of the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month, and they encamped at Gilgal on the east border of Jericho. And those 12 stones which they took out of the Jordan, Joshua set up at Gilgal. And he said to the people of Israel, when your children ask their fathers in times to come, what do these stones mean? Then you shall let your children know Israel passed over this Jordan on dry ground. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan for you until you passed over, as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which he dried up for us when we passed over, so that all the peoples of the earth may know that the hand of the Lord is mighty, that you may fear the Lord your God forever. Then they come to Jericho. What have the people in Jericho heard about the God of the children of Israel? What do these stones mean? Thoughts? Ideas? Okay. Thank you for your input. Think on these things. Ponder a minute. Kyle, would you dismiss us?